Thanks once again for joining us for this Tuesday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm David Percy, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. First slide here, first graphic. Glacier Dam outburst flood has started on the Salmon River near Hyder, and water levels will continue to rise through the next few days as water drains from Summit Lake. And potential minor flooding is possible along Mile 9, or near Mile 9, along the road that follows the river. And of course, beware of any debris floating down the river, and that water is very cold coming out of the glacier lake there. And so if you fall in, you want to get out before any hypothermia sets in. And from there, let's see, how's this weather graphic? We've got leftover wind advisories going for the next few hours, expected to end early this evening for the southeastern Brooks Range, Arctic Village, down into the upper Yukon Valley areas, and also around the greater Galena area. Wind advisories out until early this evening for winds continuing to gust upwards of 40 miles an hour with sustained winds in the 20 to 30 mile per hour range. That'll be coming down 15 to 20 miles an hour, but still expect to carry the gusts of 40 early this evening, and then those will drop off here later this evening and continue a downward trend into tomorrow as well. There are also high surf advisories out. These are out until noon Wednesday for the northwest coast, Bering, or the north side of the Seward Peninsula there, as well as the Bering Strait coast and St. Lawrence Island. And high surf advisory also there for eastern Norton Sound and along the Yukon Delta coast, and that's out until noon Wednesday for those areas. And then when those end, that'll be it for a while. And for the fire danger map, central interior and to the west, a lot of blue there, especially, and also for the North Slope and the Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast. North Slope seeing some rain over the last 24 hours there, anywhere from 1/10 to upwards 4/10 of an inch. In some areas a little more, other areas less. And then the areas of high to very high fire danger, you can see still over the eastern interior. I've seen it kind of expand and over the Copper River Basin, with quite an area of high fire danger in the Copper River Basin. And the Fairbanks area, also some high fire danger in there in the areas that didn't receive some significant rainfall. Like Nenana had a 24-hour rainfall amount of 1/2 inch with soaking rain. So that area, high fire danger, is to the east or northeast of that. And then also along the eastern or the north slopes of the eastern Alaska Range, some areas of high to very high fire danger in a narrow band there. And also some high fire danger reappearing here over the west central Kenai Peninsula, but nothing too extensive or serious. Of course, nothing like it was a few weeks ago. And from there, satellite imagery showing a lot of clear skies, sunshine breaking out south central Alaska, North Gulf Coast, some mid and high level moisture over the southern Kenai Peninsula. Mostly cloudy Kodiak Island there, with Copper River Basin clearing out, some areas of sunshine over much of the eastern interior as well. And the southern Panhandle seeing some sunshine today with a little more in the way of clouds up to the north, kind of that remnants of the weakening front. Rainfall's really tapered off along the eastern North Gulf Coast. 24-hour amount ending at mid-afternoon was around 1 inch at Yakutat, but the 12-hour amount was much less than that, down to like 1/4 of an inch there, about 1/10 of an inch falling Juneau in the last 12 hours. And out to the west, a lot of clear skies, St. Lawrence Island up toward the Bering Strait, and out over the Bering Sea, we've got some significant areas of clearing out there. However, clouds in and around the Pribilof Islands there, and the moisture with the next system pushing up into the west central Aleutians there, spreading rain with it in that location, and also an increase in the winds later on. Then some moisture moving northeastward there, coming across Kodiak Island, and again, Barren Island, southern Kenai Peninsula. And on the chart today, see higher pressure clearing it out over southern Alaska, with the low pressure area moving northward slowly and weakening. with the winds still gusting upwards of 40 miles an hour at Kotzebue this afternoon. Arctic Village seeing gusts 35 miles an hour, as well as Unalakleet, but all those winds are coming down, really gone light over southern Alaska. And next is some spreading rain into the Aleutians tonight. That'll become even more widespread. Winds will increase up to small craft advisory levels later tonight. And moving eastward, Adak and Atka, look for some partial clearing, light winds. Fox Islands, maybe some clear skies around the Pribilofs, as well as low clouds and fog with light wind conditions over the eastern Bering Sea. High pressure taking over the central and southern part of the state, resulting in light winds and clearing skies. And it should be dry over the southeast coast and eastern North Gulf Coast tonight, with increasing clouds later ahead of that warm front. And then up to the north, rain and snow, Arctic coast, North Slope, and higher elevations of the Brooks Range, with a couple of troughs rotating around that low that kicks off to the northeast. And then high pressure moves to the Bering Strait, so the eastern Bering Sea and Chukchi Sea will see light winds, dry conditions during the day tomorrow. Mostly sunny, southern third or half of the state. About the Yukon River there, northward, chance of showers or areas of rain, fog, and drizzle for the North Slope and Arctic coast. Also some rain slides up to the northeast, makes landfall along the eastern North Gulf Coast early tomorrow, affecting the extreme northern panhandle, but it'll stay partly mostly sunny down to the south with fairly warm temperatures. Wind and rain slowly trying to push into the Fox Islands, but Bering Sea and the Aleutians look wet and windy for the day tomorrow. And then on Thursday, that low tracks east-northeastward, weakens a little bit. So the gale force winds tomorrow forecast for the central Aleutians will drop off and turn northwesterly, and some 25 mile per hour or 25 knot winds could push into the Alaska Peninsula on Thursday, with periods of light rain up to the Pribilofs. Interior Alaska looking really good, partly mostly sunny, especially over the southern and central part of the state. It looks dry though, all the way to the Arctic coast, maybe a few clouds, mostly cloudy skies, Brooks Range out to the Arctic coast. Periods of rain as that low center tracks to the north coast of the Panhandle, but staying dry down to the south. Low temperatures tonight, lower to mid-50s for the Panhandle, otherwise all of interior Alaska in the 40s, exception being maybe upper 30s for the Brooks Range, North Slope, mid-30s for the central Arctic coast, and lower 40s out over the Bering Sea. Tin City, Wales, maybe down around 39, but mid to upper 40s for the Aleutians, as well as Kodiak Island. Highs tomorrow with the sunshine, upper 60s to lower 70s. The Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, Anchorage area, lower 70s in the Copper River Basin, mid to upper 60s in Bristol Bay, lower 60s in the Kuskokwim Valley, as well as the central and eastern Tanana Valley, with 40s for the Brooks Range, and highs struggling to make 40 degrees on the central Arctic coast, with lower to mid 50s there out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea, and highs in the mid-60s northern panhandle, call it 70 to 80 down over the southern southeast coast. Lows in the mild mid to upper 50s for the panhandle on Thursday morning. Interior Alaska, upper 30s, mid to upper 30s for the Brooks Range, North Slope, central eastern Arctic coast. Otherwise, kind of the cool 40s for the remainder of interior Alaska, and upper 40s out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Highs 70 to 75 for the inland areas of the Kenai Peninsula, Manduska and Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin on Thursday. Upper 50s to mid 60s for the central interior, upper 60s in the southwest interior, maybe some lower 70s around Bristol Bay, and 70 to 75 over the southern panhandle, mid 60s up to the north, and lower to mid 50s out over the Bering Sea.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to flying weather, IFR, western North Slope, Arctic coast, eastward into the eastern Arctic coast there, and then the farther eastern Beaufort Sea coast, VFR, central western Brooks Range, IFR, northern Bering Sea, Seward Peninsula, Norton Sound, Yukon Delta, down across central and eastern Bering Sea, and most of the Aleutians into the western Alaska Peninsula. Got some pretty good VFR, Kodiak Island, northward into Cook Inlet and the central and southern southeast interior. Some marginal VFR hung up along the North Gulf Coast, Prince William Sound. IFR around Yakutat and right off the southeast coast. Otherwise, marginal VFR there for the east side of Kodiak Island. And for the afternoon, VFR, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, and then IFR for the far western Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, southern Bering Sea, as well as areas around the Pribilofs, north to the St. Lawrence Island area. Bering Strait coast, western Seward Peninsula, including Nome, IFR, and the Arctic coast, IFR. Marginal VFR for the North Slope, most of the Brooks Range and the Koyukuk Valley westward to Selawik, Kotzebue, Kivalina. Otherwise, good VFR over the southeast part of the state. And then for Thursday morning, IFR, Brooks Range to the Arctic coast and the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, just about all of the Bering Sea and Aleutians, IFR, including the Pribilofs. IFR and marginal VFR for the Alaska Peninsula, some marginal VFR into Bristol Bay, but southwest coast, VFR, Kodiak VFR, much of the interior, all the way up to the Yukon River, VFR. IFR still there from Yakutat into possibly Elephant Cove, marginal VFR, Lincoln Glacier Bay, and northern interior there, the Panhandle, and then down right along the coast of Prince of Wales Island. And for Thursday afternoon, IFR, northern southeast coast, as well as the eastern North Gulf coast, especially Yakutat there, and then down along the coast of the Panhandle with VFR over the southeast Panhandle. VFR, most of Kodiak Island and southern Alaska, most of the eastern interior, VFR from Prince William Sound all the way up to the eastern Brooks Range, IFR, eastern Arctic coast, IFR, much of the Bering Sea, Pribilofs, St. Lawrence Island, the Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, Nunivak Island, though, in the VFR zone along with the southwest coast. Passes, Anatuvik, marginal at times tomorrow, marginal VFR expected at times for Adigan as well. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR, rainy VFR, windy VFR, Isabel VFR, Mintasta, same forecast, VFR, Tanita, open with VFR flying through either entrance, and Portage, marginal VFR to VFR, Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet up over the Chukchi Sea in the northwest part of the state, 4,000 feet, northern interior sloping up to about 8,000 feet as you get down toward the North Gulf Coast, Alaska Peninsula. Warmer over the Panhandle, anywhere from 12 to 14,000 feet. Icing, most of it up north, in fact, just about all of it up north, a little bit breaking away there, affecting possibly the Pribilofs, some possible isolated light Reimer mixed icing there. Reimer mixed icing, isolated moderate there, northern half of the state on out to the Arctic coast, and also maybe the Bering Strait down to St. Lawrence Island. Southern Alaska, Gulf, and the southeast coast, Kodiak, all icing free for the day Wednesday. Jet stream, westerlies across southern Alaska, 70 to 80 knots. Lighter winds up toward the upper low over the eastern Arctic coast, and then 70 knot southwest winds cutting into the northern Panhandle. And at 9,000 feet, westerlies, 40 knots there along the Yukon River, and especially the upper Yukon Valley, and 40 knot southwest winds over the northern Panhandle. Pretty light though over southern Alaska, high pressure making for light winds over the southwest interior. And southwest winds there with that low back over the western Aleutians. And for 3,000 feet, 45 knots, southerlies there, Adak and Atka, or mostly Atka Island, associated with that low south of Adak. And not too bad over the interior, westerlies maybe 25 to 30 knots, especially on the north slope. And turbulence-wise, considerable moderate turbulence over the north-central interior, along and north of the Yukon River to the Brooks Range, and also out over the western and central Aleutians.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms. Why they occurred, the distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region, the rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense and what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. There are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. Well, one of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We are upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Hey, looking at today's sea ice analysis, you can still see some heavier ice up there just off the central coast there near Point Barrow, and then in kind of close to the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline there, the central area there, Prudhoe Bay, and then thins out again over toward Kaktovik, and then really thins out into Mackenzie Bay. And really not much change expected over the next few days except a continued trend of thinning and lessening ice packs. So from there, moving on to get the right keystroke here. There we go. Coastal water forecast. Northwest winds along the panhandle there, 15 to 20 knots. Extreme north coast there, much lighter. Kind of in a weak ridge there, west at 10 or becoming variable at 10, and then east winds 20 knots there for the eastern North Gulf Coast. Inside waters, pretty light winds tomorrow, variable 10 knots, seas 2 feet. And then for Thursday, about the same. We'll go Clarence Strait. Clarence Strait will have northwest winds at 15 knots with 3-foot seas. Otherwise, central and northern inside channels and waters looking at southerlies at about 10 knots with slight seas. South coast, west-southwest on Thursday, 10 to 15 knots, and the north coast, south-southeast winds, 15 knots with 6-foot seas. And for Prince William Sound, light variable winds at 10 knots with 2-foot seas. And for Cook Inlet, variable to northeast winds at 10 knots, much lighter than the last couple of days. Seas 2 to 3 feet, variable winds at 10 knots for Kamishak Bay. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands. That low center just off to the southeast there, so northeast 25-knot winds there. And northeast 20-knot winds for the western North Gulf Coast. And actually the eastern North Gulf Coast there, they got variable. I'd bet on east winds at 20 knots or east-northeast at 20 with seas at 5 feet, light and variable Prince William Sound. And then for Thursday, for the eastern North Gulf Coast, northeast at 20 knots, seas 5 feet, Prince William Sound, north at 10. Cook Inlet, variable winds, 10 knots, seas 2 to 3 feet, light variable winds for Kamishak Bay as well at 10 knots. And for the Barren Islands, north winds, 15 knots with 5-foot seas. Kodiak Island, for Wednesday, winds will be out in the northeast, 20 to 30 knots with 5 to 9-foot seas. Alaska Peninsula, northeast 15 to 20 knot winds in the forecast, seas 3 to 6 feet, light northerlies for Bristol Bay at about 10 knots. Bristol Bay on Thursday, east winds 15 knots, and Kodiak Island, northeast winds 10 to 15 knots. Alaska Peninsula, east winds 20 knots, seas 4 to 6 feet. Eastern Aleutians for Wednesday, small craft advisories, east winds 20 to 30 knots. Gale warnings for the central Aleutians, east winds 35 knots, seas around 10 feet. And for the western Aleutians, winds will be out of the east-northeast at 30 knots. And for Thursday, western Aleutians, west-northwest winds 20 to 25 knots. Small craft advisories for Adak and Atka for west winds at 25 knots. Eastern Aleutians, south to southeast winds 20 to 25 knots with seas at 6 to 7 feet. And for the Bering Sea, along the southwest coast, variable winds at 10 knots. St. Matthew Island, variable winds at 10 knots. Pribilofs east at 20. St. Lawrence Island, winds south at 15 knots. Even lighter winds in store for Norton Sound and St. Lawrence Island on Thursday, out of the northeast at 10 knots and 20-knot winds for the southwest coast. Small craft advisories for the Pribilof Islands, east winds increasing to 30 knots, seas building to 8 feet. And for the Arctic coast, or eastern Beaufort Sea coast, west winds 20 to 25 knots, lighter though to the west side, or the central and western coast, all the way down to Cape Thompson. Northwest winds expected at 15 knots, 3 to 5 foot seas, and 20-knot winds out of the west for the Chukchi Sea. And then for Thursday, from Wales to Cape Beaufort, northwesterlies at 10 knots, central and western Arctic coast, northwest 15 knots. Small craft advisories for the eastern Beaufort Sea coast for west winds 25 to 30 knots. And for tonight, look for some rain or rain and snow up there, Arctic coast, North Slope, and higher elevations of the Berks Range. But amounts will be light, nothing too heavy. And then it dries out, variable, partly to mostly cloudy along the Yukon River there, south of the river. Expect more clearing, light winds, dry over the panhandle with some variable clouds to the north, actually increasing ahead of that warm front system moving into the Aleutians. Slowly moves eastward, spreading rain to Unmac and Unalaska Island. Rain over the northern panhandle, eastern North Gulf Coast. Unsettled over the northern interior. Mostly sunny and light winds, southern Alaska. That holds into Thursday. Mostly sunny skies, dry conditions, light winds over the interior. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.